Introducing On the Horizon, a podcast by Horizon Resources Cooperative, supporting farmers and ranchers across Northwest North Dakota and Northeast Montana. Join host Levi Hall as he engages with agronomy experts, grain traders, and community leaders, sharing insights to help you make confident, informed decisions for your operations. From market trends to practical advice, we bring you the conversations that matter.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Horizon. This week we have the return of Guy Olson, the fuel guy. After our first episode on winter fuel additives, we had a lot of great comments, and we were excited to bring Guy back and expand on our conversation about the difference in winter formulations and summer formulations in diesel, and talk about what people can do to prepare their diesel tanks for the summer months. I'm excited for you to listen to this episode. Once again, it is jam-packed with great information. Enjoy the show.
At Horizon Resources, we're more than a business. We're a farmer-owned cooperative. Every decision, dollar, and service is built to benefit you. We power your operations with reliable energy and expert agronomy advice to help your crops grow. We deliver market expertise and flexible grain solutions so you get the best return. We support your livestock with premium nutrition. We offer everyday convenience and top-tier fuel in your community. As a Horizon Resources member, you're not just a customer, you're an owner.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Horizon. This week, the return of Guy Olson. Thanks, Guy, for coming back.
The fuel guy. Yeah. Great to be here.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yes. So if you missed the first episode we talked about back in February, we released an episode where we talked about winter diesel and the additives and how the fuel guys, Performance Fuel Solutions, has such great products to help your equipment run more efficiently in the winter. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about summer diesel. So why don't you jump right into it, Guy, and give us a little bit of an intro into summer diesel. And as this weather starts to turn back around, we start to put these winter jackets away. I think when I think of additives and, especially fuel stabilizers, and I know we touched on this the first time, but I think of it in the fall. And I think I'm storing my lawnmower, I'm storing my boat, I'm storing any piece of equipment, whatever I'm not going to be using a lot. That's when I need to be using it. Correct me.
Well, you definitely do need a stabilizer for those times of the year. But what a lot of people miss is the need for a stabilizer every time you fuel. Mm-hmm. We don't think of it that way. We think of it for storage alone. But the purpose of a stabilizer is to stop the fuel from oxidizing, which happens when it gets old, when it sits. The fuel's not as stable as it used to be. It gets worse and worse. It seems like as time goes on. The big benefit of a stabilizer now is to keep your fuel from aging due to the recirculation heating issue you have, because these new systems are such high pressure, mandated to meet all these requirements, that they have to keep the fuel circulating in the tank, out of the tank, in the tank, out of the tank, or back and forth. And so our fuel gets hot. Used to be you consumed the fuel, with the exception of, I think Detroit was the one doing the circulation. Everybody else, you would just consume it. It would go up to the injectors or carburetor, and it would go into your engine, and that was that. That's not the case anymore. You're constantly pumping fuel in. It goes through that super hot rack, the injector rack, and then it goes back into the tank. And what happens, the process of heating that fuel causes the fuel to oxidize, to become old. And of course, old fuel doesn't burn as efficiently. Oxidized fuel doesn't burn well. So that has a tendency to create more deposits in your fuel system, right? Or deposits of carbon buildup, your valves, your cylinders, whatever it is, your injectors, and your fuel doesn't burn as efficiently. So you get less fuel economy out of it, less performance out of it. And it's not because you've put in old fuel, it's because you've created old fuel, and a stabilizer will stop that from happening and keep your fuel fresh.
Now, all of your products have stabilizers in them, and you're going to talk to me a little bit today about the benefits of year-round additives and why you need to do that.
Yes. That's such a great question. So people think about, especially diesel, they think about wintertime. We need an anti-gel. And with gasoline, we think about every time, get this. So every time you get your oil changed, we're going to put in a quart or a pint or whatever of injector cleaner. And I want you to think about this. That is ludicrous. So you go in, you got a dirty fuel system, a dirty combustion system. You put nice clean motor oil in your car and an injector cleaner to blast all that carbon and all that garbage out of your fuel system into your oil system, right? Which you get to run it for the next 3 months. It's absolutely nuts. It's as wrong as it can possibly be. I had a chemical engineer call me after I did one of the Motor Trend shows, and he said, "You were so right. I've never thought of that." He goes, "I'm ashamed of myself. All these years, I thought I was doing it right." Yeah. And when you said it, I thought, he's absolutely right. Why in the world would I want an injector cleaner when I change my oil? You're better off to keep your fuel system clean all the time. And so we have the two products for diesel. We have the summer version, which is called Power Plus Diesel Additive Complete Formula. And then we have the winter, the Arctic Extreme, which is the same product, but it only has the anti-gel added to it. So you don't need both products. You need one or the other, right? And the benefit of running a summer additive, a summer diesel, let's talk about that diesel for now.
Yeah.
The benefit of that is not only keeping it clean all the time, keeping it lubricated all the time. It's important keeping it stable all the time. But we also want to keep the water out of it all the time. You know, diesel fuel loves water. There's no vapor pressure. You know, gasoline, you take the cap off and you get that shh. You don't have that with diesel because diesel doesn't have vapor pressure. So diesel loves water. And every time you fuel, you're getting water in your tank. It comes out of the atmosphere. Plus, the new fuel system, remember we talked about all that heat? What does that heat do when you pump a 150-degree fuel into a cold fuel tank and it's cold outside? You get condensation, right? And so that condensation happens. But the majority of your water comes in your fuel system in the spring and in the fall when you have a lot of rain, you'll have a lot of humidity or whatever. You get a lot of water in your fuel system. Now, you'll experience the problem when it gets cold, but you had the problem all summer long. So what we want to do is take that problem away. So when winter gets here, we've taken all the water out. We don't have any because we've kept it out a little at a time, all the time, right? We're going to break it down into molecular size. We're going to encapsulate it, emulsify it, and remove it from your system. So when it gets here, we don't have that particular problem.
So let's go into that a little bit more because you said that this is naturally happening. They love each other. And we've got a 10,000 gallon bulk tank that we're filling up at the farm. And how does putting your product in there, how does that fix the problem? Because shouldn't that water still be there?
Yeah, and the water will be there. And so by treating it every time, the additive is designed, again, to break down that water, remove it from the fuel system, emulsify it, keep it in suspension, and remove it from the fuel itself. So you want to treat it. Otherwise, you just have a buildup in these tanks. I've sampled thousands of tanks. And you know, the worst tanks that you sample are the ones that get the most turnover. You'd think that the turnover keeps the tanks cleaner.
Right.
It's not the case. The more fuel you turn over, the dirtier the tanks become, because every time you transfer fuel, you bring in water, you bring in sediment. And so the additive itself not only is designed to remove the water, but also break down and emulsify the garbage in the tank. We literally have taken tanks that you couldn't even sample because they had so much sludge in the bottom. And 1 year after they start using the additive, the tanks are clean. You know, those who have a high turnover.
Wow.
And so it makes a difference, just emulsifying, removing it, keeping it clean a little at a time. And we're not flushing the system. We just want to keep it clean, and you don't have that problem.
So really your options are you either do this or you bring in a vac truck and clean out your tank every once in a while. I mean, that's
Exactly.
essentially what happens. You're either way, you're going to have to deal with a problem.
Well, and the benefit of like treating your bulk tank is then not only are you keeping your tank clean, keeping the rust and all that stuff out of the bottom itself, but you're also transferring that. Then it goes into the equipment where you're also cleaning the fuel and the fuel system itself. And so you're getting a double benefit out of the additive.
And you look at anything with a diesel engine anymore. I mean, pickups are 85,000 plus. You know, you look at the cost of tractors now, and we've got $1 million tractors driving around out in the countryside. It's very important to fix a problem before it pops up.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, think about lubricity this way. This is the story I hear. Oh, I pour a quart of Marvel Mystery Oil in every 10,000 miles. I pour a quart of ATF in every 5,000 miles. First up, those are not lubricity agents. Lubricity agents are very specific. You notice they're really not a lubricant. They're a lubricity agent. If you call a chemical manufacturer, say, I need a lubricant for my fuel, they say they don't make a lubricant for your fuel. Say a lubricity agent, got it. That we can handle, right? So it is different, right? It's just no different than hydraulic oil is from 90-weight gear oil. They're not interchangeable. They're designed specifically for a purpose. And so lubricity agents are that same way. It's important to keep it lubricated each and every time. You can't just occasionally lubricate your fuel system. Try that with your oil, right? Just drain your oil pan, and then every 5,000 miles, pour a quart of ATF in, or motor oil, or whatever. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And your fuel system's no different. And again, they're 2/3 the cost, as we discussed last time, of these new engines are the fuel systems themselves. The tolerances are incredibly tight. The pressures are so high, you know, and the injection cycles now, and a lot of these new engines are 3 to 5 injection cycles per combustion cycle. So we used to have 1 combustion cycle, 1 injection cycle. Now we're averaging 5 injection cycles per combustion cycle. Break down the math on that. You can be driving down the highway in a new diesel engine at 2,000 RPM, say, and you've got your injectors opening and closing, cycling 2,500 to 3,000 times per second per injector, right? Do you think it's important to keep that lubricated?
You know, I hadn't done the math on that until you just said it. That's an unbelievable amount of time.
It is unbelievable. You got to keep the lubricity as high as you can, you know, to what you need. It's really important that they are lubricated or have that lubricity each and every time. And people don't think about that. They just pour a little in once in a while. It's got to be on a consistent basis, and it's got to be clean all the time. You know, we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of data, test data on this product. You can find so much of it at fuelguys.com. It's on there, and we put it on there. We got a lot more that we don't put on there because eventually it just gets mind numbing. There's just so much, but it's been tested every which way. One of the tests they did was a cleanup test. They take a new set of injectors. They take the fuel, the diesel fuel. They put in a zinc additive, which just enhances it, makes it get dirty faster. And they run this test down to an 88% efficiency, meaning we've lost 12% performance and economy, right? Then they stop the test. They pull out a couple of injectors, do all their measurements, all their testing, put them back in, then they put in our additive with that, and then they see how quickly it goes back to 100%. And it's really amazing, right? The amazing part of this test was they noted this. The injector nozzle is 150 microns. Now, that's the thickness of 2 human hairs side by side. If you got thick hair, it could be 1 hair. Right. But that's 2 human hairs side by side. That's how big the injector opening is. Now, we had a 12% loss of efficiency. How much deposit do you think was on that in those injector nozzles to cause a 12% loss? It was 5 microns. You know, you can't even see 5 microns. Bacteria is 5 microns. And with a 5 micron deposit, an invisible deposit to the eye, we had lost 12% efficiency. Now, I don't know about you, but a 12% loss of efficiency is not helpful to my pocketbook. Not only are you using more fuel, and losing that economy and that performance, but you're also creating more carbon. You're creating more soot in your engine oil, right? You're burning less efficiency. Your EGR systems are getting dirty. Your recirculation systems and your DPF, your diesel particulate filters, those beautiful little filters that regen all the time. Guess what? They're building up with more soot. So now you're regenning more often, which is using more fuel. It's just a constant cycle. So when can you afford a 5 micron deposit in your injectors? Never, right? And so I never tell people I'm going to get you an increase in fuel economy. That's just too snake oil, right? That's really hard to prove. Now I have data where it's been tested as it was a 3.6% increase by keeping it clean. Great, that's terrific. I'm not going to promise you that, but I will promise you this. A clean fuel system always gets better efficiency and performance than a dirty one. That's just common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and especially when our customers and our member owners, they're working in dirty environments, especially out here in Northwest North Dakota, Northeast Montana, whether you're a farmer that's out in the field or you're in the oil field out here. These are environments that, dirt and gunk and buildup happens. And so how are you combating that?
Well, again, that continuous use each and every time you fuel by keeping it clean a little at a time, all the time. Obviously, by filtering your tanks, that's really critical that you filter your tanks itself. That they make a desiccant air breather that you should have on your fuel tanks. That's really important because every time that tank breathes, you got moisture in the air, and that will stop the moisture from infiltrating inside that tank. There's a number of things. If you do a bottom fill on your tank where you're coupled to the tank itself, you'll get less water transfer than if you just stick a big hose off the truck into the top of the tank and fill it that way. That will give you the most water because it's simply available to pull it out of the atmosphere into the tank itself. So all of that stuff can make a difference. Above ground tanks obviously have a lot more problems than below ground tanks because of the temperature changes, the constant temperature changes. And so things to look for.
So if I've got let's say it's a 5,000 gallon tank. So I'm not taking a whole transport load of fuel. I'm bringing the bulk truck in and I may be putting 2,000-3,000 gallons in at a time. When's the proper time to add this additive to that?
Well, we recommend that if you're not getting it already mixed in the truck itself, you can pour it into the truck and then pump it into the tank itself. That's a great way to do it. That's done all the time. You can put it in the bulk tank itself and then dump the fuel on top of it. Again, that would be your second best option. You can dump it in afterwards. It mixes relatively easily, but bulk tanks are notorious for having very little circulation. Actually have a dealer out of Colorado that does fuel polishing systems where they pull a small amount all the time and pump it back in, filter it through a 1 micron filter. It's an incredible system. And then that adds the additive at the same time where you put it in and it'll mix the additive in the correct proportions. And if you are interested in a fuel polishing system, you can sure get a hold of us. It's just really a great way to keep that fuel clean all the time. It's important.
So one thing, when you were talking about the microns on the filter, that reminded me of our conversation from February when we talked about the formulation differences between number 1 and number 2. We didn't necessarily, we talked a little bit about the formulation differences, but everyone thinks about the blend. But why don't you talk a little bit about the formulations and how there's a summer formulation and a winter formulation?
Yeah, so summer diesel, gas is the same, actually. Gas has a summer version and a winter version. The summer diesel, you don't want to be running in the winter because it's not made to run in the cold weather. And the winter diesel, you can run in the summer, but you don't want to run summer diesel in the winter. Gasoline is the flip. You can run summer gas in the winter, but you don't want to run winter gas in the summer because they add like a butane to make your car start easier in the wintertime, but it increases the vapor pressure. So you have a tendency to have more vapor lock issues in the summertime with the gas. But in the diesel itself, summer, you always buy your fuel for the season in which you want to use it. That being said, you can use winter diesel in the summer. You do not want to use summer diesel in the winter. And generally, they start at the refinery, the turnovers around mid-October. This is what I always tell people. If you want a good winter number 2 and you've got a bulk tank, a good time to buy that early November, because then you've got the turnover at the refinery, everything's in the pipeline, and you're getting a good winter number 2. And think of it this way. So every barrel of crude oil produces so much number 1, so much number 2, so much gasoline, so much, asphalt, whatever it is, right? Depends on the barrel. It's not always the same. But they have the ability to take, say, take number 2 fuel and crack it or superheat it and make a number 1 out of it, or a mock number 1. So it's very similar. It has its own little quirks, like it retains more water, but it's available, right? They can do that. So when it gets really cold in the wintertime, you can crack some of that number 2 and make a version of number 1. It's not the better version, but it is a version. And because number 1 is big money, right? It's bringing big dollars. Plus we gotta stay running. But in November, we don't really have that need for the number 1 yet. It's not super cold. So you're really getting a better number 2. Now in January, when it gets really cold out and number 1 is at a premium and everybody's wanting number 1, when they're creating the number 2, right, we're going to suck every ounce of number 2 off of that barrel or number 1 off that barrel of crude oil that we can. And we're going to dip into the number 2, the lighter end of the number 2, and we're going to crack that and make a number 1, which leaves you with a heavier version of the number 2, the less quality version. So if you want a good winter fuel, I say November is the better time to get your winter fuel than January, because January, if it's cold especially, is going to have a tendency to have absorbed some of that good number 2 and make number 1 out of it.
Simple supply and demand.
Supply and demand is nobody's fault.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
just the way it is. But so buy it for the season you need it, but also just think of it logically for that. Mm-hmm. Blending the fuel, the one thing to keep in mind, we didn't cover last time. We did cover the weight of the fuel. Number 1 is lighter than number 2. So if you have a tank, a bulk tank, and it's half full with number 2, and you say, oh, it's going to be cold, I'm going to dump some number 1 on it. And then you dump it in and then you end up gelling up and you say, I thought I had a blend. Chances are you didn't have a blend. I did a tank one time for a company. They had gelled up, they dumped number 1 on top. I went in and sampled the bottom of the tank. It was straight number 2. The top of the tank was straight number 1, because the weight is different and number 1 is light. You put it on heavy number 2, especially if the temperature's different as well. It doesn't just readily mix. And now if you're bottom filling, like we talked, coupled to your tank to avoid moisture and stuff, that will put the number 1 on bottom and let the heavier number 2 settle down through it. So that's really important.
One other thing that we really teased on, but we didn't get into, was a microbial aspect. Now, as a cattle guy myself growing up, I knew about microbes that are in the cattle stomach and how we're always talking about feeding these bugs. This was the first time that I had ever heard of the microbial aspect in fuel. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that and dive a little bit deeper into that one, Guy.
Yeah. It doesn't, I'm not a scientist guy. I'm not a school guy. I don't like that kind of stuff very well, but this is really a fun subject. Mm-hmm. So fuels, gas and diesel, but it's primarily diesel, grow microbes. And these little bugs, they're actually a bug, a living organism. They eat the hydrocarbons in the fuel, and they use the water in your fuel as an oxygen source. They'll take the little bubble of water with them, and that'll be their oxygen source. And they live in the strata, the layer between the water on the bottom of the tank and the fuel. So if you've got water in your tank, which you shouldn't have, but if you do, they'll live right there between the fuel and the water, because water always wants to sit underneath the fuel. And they have their little environments and they grow in there. And then they obviously poop in your tank. And that makes acid, right? And this acid literally can dissolve stainless steel. And it's really amazing what these things are capable of doing. It's amazing. But
that's some pretty potent acid.
Oh, yeah. And so it wasn't a huge problem for a long time until the low sulfur fuel came out. Low sulfur fuel breeds microbes at a much higher rate than high sulfur fuel. And so I was writing an article. I was working with ASTM for almost a year on a project they had done. And I had asked the guy a few questions. And one of them was, what's the difference? Well, why low sulfur fuel? And he explained it to me this way. He said, high sulfur fuel is like a piece of rich chocolate cake. They eat a little bit, just only so much you can eat, and you're perfectly fine. He said, low sulfur fuel's like a bag of potato chips. You just eat and eat and eat. You just can't stop eating. And of course, obviously, the more you eat, the more byproduct you produce, right? And that byproduct creates that acid in your tank itself. And so they grow at a much higher rate in a low sulfur fuel situation. So we've seen that. We've also seen the fuel returns, as we talked about, these hot fuel returns. Well, guess what? These microbes love warm fuel. They used to hibernate in the winter when we had cold fuel because we didn't have any circulation. So they would hibernate in the cold. They'd had their growing season right in the summer. They don't have that now. They got a growing season all year long. So the hot fuel is not only creating oxidation and asphalting in your tank and poor combustion, but it's also creating moisture, which creates more bugs in your tank, which allows them to grow all year long, which creates acid. There's all kinds of stuff. Everything snowballs from one thing to another to another. And so during the process of this, I asked one of the scientists that had been working on this. It was a huge, huge trucking fleet. They'd done a 1-year study. They had went the first year. They said they were placing 300 fuel tanks a year on these trucks, not even knowing they had a microbial problem. And after starting using Biocide to treat these systems periodically, it's not something you use every time, but every few months, to treat the system. I think the first year was 2 tanks. So we went from 300 to 2 tanks. And so that makes a big difference. But what he said was that these bugs are smart, right? So the product you use, we use a product that is soluble in water and fuel together. That's one of the big differences. So it can attack the fuel layer and the water layer itself. And it's a very concentrated commercial version. But he said, what we found out was when you're buying these diluted off-the-shelf products, they can actually make it worse. And it's like, how does that happen? He says, it's like this. Because these bugs are smart, he said they really have personalities like people. You have bugs that eat rapidly and you have bugs that eat slowly. He said, so you'll put in a biocide, but it's not enough biocide to kill everything. It's kind of like having 50 rats in your cellar and putting down 40 pellets of rat poison. That doesn't mean you're going to kill 40 rats. You may kill 20 because you got the big hogs that are wanting to eat all the poison, and then you got other ones. And it's the same with this. He said you put in a little biocide, and the faster eating bugs consume all the biocide, and the slower eating ones will consume a little bit. Well, now you've killed off the faster eating ones. The slower eating ones, they don't get enough to kill them because, again, this is a pesticide, right? This is not a normal fuel additive.
Sure.
And they get enough to get them sick. And so now they know. So 6 months later, you're still having a problem. So you put in more biocide and they say, no, thank you. I've been this route before. So you can actually make this problem worse with the biocide if it's not treated properly. And that really changed how the industry treated it. At that time, even the biocide I had a dose ratio of half after the first treatment. They've changed all of that. It's full dose every time because we don't want to create an immunity to these bugs. It really is fascinating.
So what is your Biocide product then?
It's a FQS 1.5, and it is a commercial product. It's the same stuff they would use in the refineries. 1 quart does 2,500 gallons. And again, it's not something you treat each and every time, but it's not a bad idea. I think we talked before about an individual who came to me. Every fuel filter he had bought had a leak in it. He didn't know why. It was my fuel filter leaking. How do I get all the bad fuel filters? It wasn't a fuel filter problem. It was a microbial problem eating holes in the fuel filters. And I've seen these things literally destroy millions of dollars worth of equipment and tanks and bulk tanks. And they'll eat holes right in your bulk tank if you don't mind having a leaky bulk tank, or your fuel tanks. Some are extremely aggressive and extremely fast. And then some grow slow and they cause problems over long periods, which are really the worst kind because then you don't know you have the problems.
So I'm guessing this is similar to the water where higher turnover, the more water you get, which increases the environment for the microbes. So if you're doing high turnover, you've got to be extra careful, probably do this on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, or what do you expect, Guy?
Yeah, usually we'll do it quarterly or semi-annually is a good, and it depends on your turnover. You know, these things it's easy to contact. You know, they can start from a spore in the air, right? So you can have your own tank. I had one company that had their own one tank. They had one fuel supplier that had one truck, been running for years, and all of a sudden they've got a horrible bug and we've got leaking fuel filters everywhere. And so it can happen like that, but it also can be transferred. So the guy in front of you at the gas station, he's got a microbial problem. He pulls in, he sticks that dirty nozzle into the tank, fills his tank up. He's got the nozzle in that contaminated tank, puts it back in the rack. You come in right behind him. You put that same dirty, contaminated nozzle in your tank. Now, guess what you've got? You've got his problem. And it can be transferred that easily itself.
Wow. I had no idea about that. So should wiping it down, does that even help? Or is it something where it's only in the fuel treatment?
You're probably not going to do that. You know, they say these tanks that have a problem, you can drain the tanks, you can go in and steam them, blast them, whatever you want to do, and still have a problem. You have to use a pesticide. You need the poison to kill them. And so we can't add this to the additive itself because it's a pesticide. It's handled a whole different way. But you don't think about a pesticide for your fuel. It's kind of creepy. But it can happen in the boating industry as well with like the gasoline, because it happens in the gasoline itself. But the more moist applications like the boating or marine applications have more issues with it in the gasoline and the diesel than say outside of that. Although it's been everywhere. It literally, I've seen such an explosion of this problem. And the sad part is a lot of times I get calls from companies with the problem that when they find out there's, you got to purchase this, it's not terribly expensive to use, but they don't want to spend anything and they'll avoid even, we just don't want to pay for it. We don't want to pay for the additive. We'll just live with the problem. That's because they're not pumping the fuel in their tanks. Somebody else, the customer's pumping it in theirs. And so it's great. You guys have always been great to deal with. And it's good to have somebody who wants to take care of their customers and wants to provide the best options, best fuel available. And that's good.
I think that's the key to Horizon Resources success is we are so customer focused. We want them to be successful, and via their success is where we will breed our own success. Because if we can go above and beyond with exemplary service, that's going to fuel the future of Horizon Resources. And that's been the goal the entire time. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm glad you, as a partner of ours, have noticed that is such a strong focus for us.
Yeah. Well, you've come a long ways, even since I started dealing with you guys many years ago. And of course, we've been in business a long time, and it's just good quality products, but also that customer service. It's so important to provide that knowledge to help people make good decisions. You know?
Well, Guy, did you have anything else on summer diesel you wanted to touch on? I know we're going to have you back on later, and we're going to talk gasoline, and we're going to hit all that stuff. Anything else you wanted to hit on summer diesel before we wrap up today?
Well, a few things.
Okay.
One, the keeping that system clean all the time, as we talked, keeping those DPF units. We've got data on the testing. We showed a 78% reduction in what they called their non-methyl hydrocarbons, which is a big part of that is the particulate. So you will see a lot fewer regens if you are using the product consistently, keeping it clean each and every time, your EGR systems, your sensors, all of these things, keeping them clean. That's really important. The product has a combustion enhancer, so when it does burn, it burns more evenly and more completely in the fuel system. And if you get online, you can see our heavy-duty testing, and you can see the results of that. Also, that the product is available in bulk, 12-ounce sizes, 64 5-gallon, 55, 275-gallon totes. If they want to get it from you for their bulk fuel, it's really important. Have it brought in with the truck or put in with the truck and delivered on site. It's very economical to use, primarily because it's super concentrated. You know, you're not putting in 4 55-gallon drums to a couple thousand gallons of fuel. It's designed for an industrial product, and your energy department can supply them with that. You just have to ask for it, and we got people who specifically ask for it. I want the Fuel Guys product from PFS, and it's a great way to keep your system clean and ready for winter. And then when winter gets here, let's roll over to the Arctic Extreme, and then all we're worried about is anti-gel. We're not worried about a clean system. It's going to start better. It's going to run better. Your filters will be better. Just follow along, do the right thing, and take care of that system, and it'll take care of that oil at the same time.
So again, call the energy office. They can line you up 572-2171, option 1. That'll get you over to the energy office. You can talk to the entire team over there. They'll know what you're talking about. They are all users of this product and believers in this product. If they weren't, we wouldn't carry it. So yeah, can't recommend that enough. Guy, your guys' website, I know I shouted this out last time, but I just can't say it enough. Your website is second to none with resources, phenomenal video bank and everything. So fuelguys.com is your website, and go there if you have any other questions.
And sign up for the newsletter. It's free. Some great information. You just get a monthly update with a little bit of education, whether it's microbial, whether it's detergency, lubricity changes, renewable fuels, which we really haven't talked about at all, but that's coming on the scene. And there are definitely some things you want to know about that. If you're running a renewable fuel or they're prodding you to running renewable fuel, we need to talk.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if that comes down the pike eventually, talking renewable fuels, and you see a lot of these operations, especially the agricultural operations, being pressured on carbon scores. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some of that pressure. I don't know that we've seen it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does come down the pike.
Yeah, and you will see it, and it is here to stay. I can promise you. Renewable biodiesel is going to be gone. You know, all the stuff we've seen, all these other come and go oxygenated fuels or whatever. Renewable fuel is here to stay.
Absolutely.
That totally, I can promise you.
Totally a believer in it myself.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on again, Guy. And we look forward to having you on again in the future.
Great to be here. I appreciate it, Levi. Thanks so much to you and Horizon. I really appreciate the association.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Horizon. If our conversation today sparked your interest, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Stay connected by following @Horizon Resources Co-op on Facebook and Instagram, and explore the world of agriculture with us. We're excited to continue bringing you real conversations with Horizon Resources industry partners, member owners, and employees, discovering more about your local neighbors and community friends. Until next time, keep looking towards the horizon.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be used or considered as an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell commodities. Horizon Resources does not make any representation, warranty, or guarantee as to the completeness, accuracy, timeliness, or suitability of any information contained within any part of this podcast. Horizon Resources does not accept any liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use or reliance on such information. Whilst the information provided has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Horizon Resources does not attest to its accuracy or completeness. Horizon Resources reserves the right to change any source without restriction or notice. The information herein is indicative only and is subject to change.